to the program. Thanks so much for being with us. For those of you who are astute observers, the microphone in my studio is now to my right, okay? Which, if that means that I have somebody in studio to my right? It's normally on my left when I don't have, but now I have somebody in studio. Just, I'm letting you know, this is what you can anticipate. So we have Jonesboro City Councilman Bobby Long is back with us. Bobby, how are you, sir?
I'm doing good.
Okay.
I'm doing good.
Always great to have you on.
I love coming in early and talking before.
Yeah.
It just makes my day better.
Yeah, it's fun in here. It's a fun environment, and it's Johnny Cash Friday. All right, so first of all, you are running for state representative.
Yes.
There's going to be a primary. You have
Yes.
so that'll be, I guess, Cole Peck is running again for that seat. So that'll be, interesting in and of itself. But you have a launch event. Tell us about that first.
I do. We have a campaign kickoff fundraiser June the 29th at the Hilton Garden Inn here in Jonesboro. It'll be from 2 to 4, and I just ask that all you guys come out and let me meet you. Mm-hmm. If I hadn't met you already, I'd love to meet you, and we'll discuss our plans for going into the primary, and then from the primary on into November. Nice.
Well, that'll be a fun event, and I'll certainly make plans to be there. So
we would love to have you there, Paul.
That's always good. So let's talk a little bit about you're right now a public official. You're an alderman for the city of Jonesboro, and for those of you across the state listening, we covered Fort Smith's Marshall Museum. You remember this? This was a potential tax increase that was voted down. The people of Fort Smith said, no, we don't want to pay more taxes for this museum. This is a similar tax increase proposal on the other side of the state in Jonesboro. Is it being called like quality of life, or they're saying that the quality of life will be better because, if we raise taxes by 1%, right?
Yeah, let me just sort of go over the whole ordinance. There's one ordinance that calls for a 1% sales tax, and within that single ordinance, the 1% is split half for fire and police, and one half for amenities, and there is a list. I mean, you're looking at projects for the arts, aquatics, beautification, libraries, museums, park facilities, recreational facilities, sidewalks, trail systems, and the list is just as wide open as the imagination can be. There's going to be the proposal would put forth a committee of 9 people, 2 from the council, 6 at large appointed by the mayor and the AP chair. They would form what they call an integrity committee charged with the job of vetting these projects and making recommendations to the council for approval. But I just have some questions, a lot of questions, and I'm trying to get those answered before we hang $220 million on the taxpayer over 12 years.
It's unbelievable. Now you actually proposed a resolution to separate these two, to have 2 separate votes, because if one's for police and fire, we're like, okay, give the people the opportunity to vote for that, but be able to vote against swimming pool.
Yeah, my proposal, first of all, was put the brakes on the whole thing and get some answers, because we have absolutely no idea where they derived the 1% from. We have absolutely no idea where they derived whether or not, or the data that would indicate that 0.5% for fire is enough, 0.5% for the other things are enough. Calvin Coolidge said collecting more taxes than is absolutely necessary is legalized robbery. And until we get a good handle on how they actually derived these figures, then we have absolutely no idea whether or not it's enough, too much, or just right. So I think until we get some of those questions answered, I think it would be foolish for us to put this in front of the people. And as part of the city council, I think that's a job of the city council, is to review these things and ask questions, scrutinize these, and make sure. Yeah.
But you're kind of a lone voice, right?
I am the lone voice.
Yeah, you're the lone voice that's skeptical about this. Because I know there's an organization out there calling themselves Team Jonesboro, which essentially means that if you're against higher taxes, that you're not on the team. Which I find a little bit of offensive. That you can't have a legitimate view that this is a terrible idea, because the idea of more money coming out of people's pockets to fund, really what is an ever expanding government can be seen as a negative idea. But what about your colleagues? Is there any talk out there that having this in a special election is shady because they know the statistics?
Well, I believe they're counting on the statistics.
Yeah.
You know, when I started looking at this, where did they actually come up with this 1%? Where'd they come up with 12 years? Why not 15? Why not 10? Why 1%?
Why not 5?
3/4? Why not a quarter and a half?
Yeah.
And I found it interesting that one of the cities that's, you know, been brought up time and time again is Fayetteville. And I just recently learned that Fayetteville had a 1% tax for 12 years. It was set to sunset January of this year. Guess what happened?
They had a special
They
election.
had a special election and renewed the tax.
Yeah, I covered that. Yeah.
Yeah, so...
But look at who Fayetteville's state representatives are. It's a very they're Democrats, and they're for higher tax. But look who Cricket County and Jonesboro's represent. They're Republicans, and they've got good voting records. And so I think it's weird when you have let's say city councilmen, not like you, but others that are pushing for higher revenue from the people, and then you have others who tend to not do those things.
At the Finance Committee, the Tuesday before this past Tuesday, I stood up and I gave my reasons as to why, I believe we need to put this brakes on. And if they are dead set against or dead determined on putting this thing through, I asked for a motion to actually send this to the city attorney, have them split this into two to where you have, half for fire and police, half for minis. That way the people, you could actually get a true representation of what the people wanted.
Yeah.
They could vote for one or the other, both or neither. That motion was ignored. I asked for it twice, and I'll ask for it again, just to make sure, but...
Well, let's assume that the police and fire really need it.
Yeah.
There's a good chance this is going to go down in flames, even though they're going to do it in a special election. I'm just telling you right now. I mean, property maintenance code. Remember the International Property Code that was passed, and then it was, when people get involved, people forget that this Cricket County, for example, voted for Ted Cruz in a Republican primary. Now, I know it's not a primary situation. You're going to have Democrats coming to the polls as well. But, I think people need to understand maybe they're forgetting how conservative, the voters really are. And they're tired of higher taxes. Now, but if you really needed police and fire, and I fought this battle, this is my 10th year in radio. 10 years ago, there was a half-cent sales tax that was on the ballot, and I was only on KBTM here in Jonesboro, only on one station, and I fought, and I grabbed the tail of an animal, and it realized it was an elephant. And it passed, I mean, it was for police and fire. That's what they said it was, and it ended up just being a shell game, right?
Yeah.
They already had the money to fund police and fire, and then they gave that from the budget, or they took the money that was going to police and fire and then moved it away, and then used the half cent to fund police and fire, and then they were able to spend it on it. And that's exactly what's going on here again, 10 years later. I want people to realize this. I may not be wiser or smarter, but I certainly remember what happened 10 years ago in Northeast Arkansas. So anyway, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think you're right. I think that people though deserve. The thing about it is, my reasoning for splitting that up was that I believe people need to know. I believe more information.
Yeah.
The more information you can get, the wiser decision you can make. And since I do feel that I'm the only one that's asking questions from the council, I really feel that come through 4 weeks from now, this is the first reading last Tuesday. It goes through 2 more readings. On the third reading, there'll be a vote whether or not to put this on the ballot or not. And I really feel like that this will end up on the ballot. However, I do know that the last tax increase was defeated, 60 to 40, and, I think that you throw this out and I trust the people of Jonesboro.
Yeah.
I do, and I think they're going to do the right thing.
September 10th would be the special
September
election.
10th would be the
It's right after school starts back, right after Labor Day. Come on out and see. This is what's so frustrating to me. I think this is morally wrong It'd be one thing if a tornado had come through,
Right.
and it was an actual emergency special election, but they're wanting it on a special election so they have a statistically higher chance of getting what they want. And in doing that, Bobby, what's frustrating to me is whether you're for higher taxes or against higher taxes, there's a larger principle, a higher principle at play here, and that principle is this: if you're a public official, you should want the largest section of the population to vote so that you know you truly have the consent of the governed.
Exactly.
So that you truly have. And when you've got people putting their kids back in school, when you've got people going to work, most people only vote twice. You know, they vote during a big, either, during the primary or during the midterms. They'll vote during the midterms in a primary and a general, or they'll vote during the general election every 4 years in a primary or in November. And basically those 4 times, and these special elections are designed for tax increases to have a higher chance of passing when you have a population that's going to work, trying to put trying to put ends meet on the table. And that's why it's morally wrong for them to do it in a special election unless it was an emergency, and it's not. A swimming pool, an aquatic center, bike trails, they're not an emergency.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I think, well, first of all, in Fayetteville, early voting, I think, was around 10% of the electorate. And overall, I think it may be around 20, maybe a little under 20. And I feel that that's what's going to happen. I think there's a couple of things, though, that I'd like to try to clarify. One is that Jonesboro does not operate in a bubble. We not only have this tax, looking at, but do you think that if we pass this tax, that impact fees aren't going to still be talked about? Food prep tax is not going to be talked about. Stormwater drainage fees are still going to be coming on. Not to mention, some of the tax increases that are looming from us that are going to impact us from Little Rock.
Yeah.
With the gas tax and things like that. So we do not operate in a bubble. I think the second clarification that I'd like people to know is that time after time, when Team Jonesboro, let me say this, there's a lot of people on Team Jonesboro that are my friends, my neighbors.
And pillars of the community.
They are.
Pillars of the community. Good people.
Yes.
Good people.
Yes. I've known Jerry Morgan for years, and he and I had a good conversation. Demos, he saw me come over and visited with me, and that's great, but we're going to agree to disagree on this one. The Team Jonesboro consistently puts forth the mantra that, they can't see a scenario where the city council would not approve a recommendation for a project because that committee represents the will of the people. That committee does not represent the will of the people. That committee represents 9 people. 2 of those would be elected, but even the city council members were not elected for the sole purpose of vetting that. So these people are appointed. Appointed people do not represent the electorate.
Correct.
They represent the will of those 9. So I think that is a big point.
Well, that is a great point. Another point would be, and I don't mean to sound elitist, but I just wonder, some of the people advocating this, have they ever researched or looked into, economics? How you incentivize, are people going to be more incentivized, for example, to interact in commerce if the taxes are too high? Is there a limit, right? You say 1%. Well, why not? If 1% is harmless, why not 5%? Why not 5%?
Well, they make the comparison that Jonesboro has the lowest sales tax rate, but against 5.
Put that on a billboard.
Put that against 5 other cities, though. When you look at Arkansas as a whole, the average sales tax rate is around 8.624. We're right smack in the middle. But if you look at Arkansas as a whole, look what happens in Northwest Arkansas, where they have to have fuel exemption.
Yeah.
Why do they do that? It's because overall our sales tax rate is so high that people can go right across the border and get it for cheaper.
Yep.
And there are tax exemptions in every single side of our state. So yes, we do as a whole. Yeah, Jonesboro may have 8.5, but still, when I can pull 5 cities, and ours would be the highest. Because
right. Well, here's the thing. Arkansas generally, though, on average, is one of the highest sales tax states in the country. and we're 44th in per capita income, and there's a reason for that. I mean, we and so it makes absolutely no sense. And I guess my point is if we're just going to go down a wish list, and this is what we would love to have. We'd love to have a swimming pool. This community has a swimming pool. We'd love to have a shooting range. We'd love to have bike trails. Those are all great ideas in terms of, you know, they'd be nice to have. I mean, I'm not going to say that they'd be great to have, you know, but we don't operate in a world of unlimited resources. I think we have some people that assume that we do.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that this tax, 1%, split out inside the ordinance, half for fire and police, half for amenities. But then the argument that they make is that you cannot separate public safety from quality of life. Now, sometimes I would agree on a certain level. Yes, you do have to have public safety in order to have a quality of life. But I don't see where a water park increases my public safety.
Correct.
So I think there's a cutoff point there.
Correct.
But they are adamant saying that you cannot separate public safety from quality of life, but yet they separate the 1% inside the ordinance.
Yes, they do.
Why do they do that?
Why do they do that?
My proposition was to separate it outside the ordinance. And then my question is, if it's a bad idea to separate it outside the ordinance, why is it a good idea to separate it inside the ordinance? Why not just make it 1%? That way more money can come in faster for dire need projects, and then all these other things get prioritized.
Yeah.
But see, that's the thing. It's like an inconsistency in thought. It's a good idea outside, but it's not a good idea inside.
Yeah, and I think if you separate it out, they know that the water park and bike trails will fail, and the police and fire might tend to pass.
Right. Not to mention the fact that you have a tax, you know, that could ultimately put a governmental entity in competition with private industry.
Oh yeah, that's exactly right.
And I don't agree with that.
Well, you know, there are shooting ranges, you know, that are privately owned. You want to build a shooting range and put the privately owned ones out of business. You know?
Well, I mean, and you know that the shooting range that goes out is going to have probably a gift shop where you can buy earplugs, glasses, things like that.
Yep.
All right, so that puts pressure on local businesses that are trying to operate for a profit and pay taxes in our schools.
Yeah.
Now, my question is, you know, we have this $54 million bike trail, you know, that's on the horizon. Are we going to have gift shops at every head of those bike trails? And are we going to sell bike parts, helmets, you know, things like that at these little gift shops and squeeze the local business person?
It wouldn't be the first time if the government were to raise taxes and then use that tax money to put other privately owned businesses out of business or make it harder. It wouldn't be the first time.
Right. See, that was one of my questions, you know, is, you know, are we going to first solicit and go after private industry for some of these projects? For instance, water parks, there's companies out there that do that for a business. They come in, evaluate a community. If that community fits their model, they come in, they buy our land, employ our people, you know, build it, run it for a profit, and pay property taxes to support our schools. I mean,
you make too much sense, though. And I'll say all this. I want to end here. The idea of a sales tax is that the more people that move here in Arkansas or Jonesboro, seen a giant surge in population over the last days. The more people that move here, the more people that are by, the more money. Your revenue goes up. Why can't they just take the increase in revenue that they're getting and put it back a few years and then build whatever they want to build? Yeah. Why do they have to come to us? Your property tax your property tax and your sales tax are designed. The more people that live here, the more money you get to take care of, quote, to take care of the people.
Right. See, right now Jonesboro is the fifth in population, fifth largest city in the state of Arkansas in population. We are the second largest in land mass. So we have a huge amount of land.
Yeah.
You know, that we annexed. I forgot when that was.
Yeah.
You know, but we annexed a lot and we spread ourselves thin. You know, so I believe that as Jonesboro fills in, you know, that's going to happen.
I wonder if people were building outside the annex part because of the tax policy, and then you're like, oh, okay, well now we've got all this tax revenue. All right, Bobby Long, appreciate it, sir. Look forward to your formal announcement for state representative at a later date, June 29th at the Hilton Garden. And we appreciate you coming on, sir.
I'm so glad you're going to be there, Paul.
Yeah. All right, so. He's holding me to it. He's holding me to my word. What is he? Okay, so folks, we got to take a break.